Alright, y'all, sit back, cause this is the story of my favorite comedian to ever walk this earth, Richard Pryor. Raw, funny, and cutting deep. Richard Pryor came screaming into the world on December 1st, 1940 in Pryor, Illinois, born into a life that wasn't no damn sitcom. His mama, Gertrude, worked the streets, and his daddy, Leroy, threw punches as a boxer and a hustler on the side. Richard grew up in his grandma, Marie's brothel. Yeah, straight up whorehouse. Kids at school slung names at him like rocks, but young Richard learned quickly how to duck and weave. Pryor wasn't no playground. It was a school of hard knocks, and he was a straight-A student in survival. The early days of hustling and dreaming, growing up in a brothel, Richard saw his life's underbelly before he could even spell it. Grandma Marie ran the house with an iron fist, tough as a $2 streak, whipping out a switch when he was stepping out of line. But she loved him fierce. By 7, he was sneaking into the famous door, a local joint, watching vaudeville comics and dreaming of the spotlight. School wasn't his thing. He was too busy cracking jokes to keep the pain at bay. Got himself expelled at age 14 for standing up to a teacher who crossed him. That's when Richard knew, ain't nobody handing out free passes. He hustled shining shoes, sweeping floors at clubs, but that stage was calling. At 15, he was doing stand-up in Pryor's black clubs, mimicking Bill Cosby's clean-cut style. By 18, he hit Chicago, then New York in 61, sharing stages with folks like Woody Allen and Bob Dylan in Greenwich Village. He was smooth, getting laughs with safe jokes, but it felt like he was wearing somebody else's skin. TV gigs came, Ed Sullivan, Merv Griffin, but Richard was relentless, like a caged animal pacing. The turning point of finding his voice was in 1969. Richard hit a wall. He's in Vegas doing his Cosby-like act for a room full of white folk, and something snapped. He looked out in that crowd and thought, what the hell am I doing? Dropped the mic and walked off stage, and split for Berkeley. That's where Richard Pryor became Richard Pryor. Hanging with the Black Panthers, poets, and radicals, he found his truth. Started talking about real shit, racism, poverty, growing up in a whorehouse. He dropped the N-word like a bomb, made white folks squirm, and black folks nod. His comedy went from polite giggles to truth-telling that hit like a fist. The shift made him a legend, but it stirred up trouble. Some clubs wouldn't book him, too raw, too real. Some black folks thought he was airing out dirty laundry. Some white folks didn't know whether to laugh or run, but Richard Pryor didn't care. Albums like That N-Word's Crazy in 1974 and Bicentennial N-Word 1976 went gold, snagged Grammys. He was saying what nobody else had the guts to do, and the world wouldn't stop listening. But what followed was a lot of love, heartbreak, and a whole lot of mess. Now let's talk about Richard Pryor's love life, because the man, he loved hard and fucked up even harder. 7 marriages to 5 women. Each one a chapter in his wild book. First was Patricia Price in 1961. They had Richard Jr., but young Pryor was too wild to settle, and followed that with Maxine Silverman in 1964. But that was a quick burn divorce. Paper still smoking. Deborah McGuire in 1977 was a firecracker. They vibed, but Richard's demons were too loud. Flynn Belaine, he married her twice, 1987 and in the 90s, had a son Stephen, but it was like trying to hold water in his hands. Jennifer Lee was his last wife. This was the real deal. Married him in 1981 and then again in 2001. She stuck through the ugliest of times even when Richard was a damn fool. He had 7 kids, Richard Jr., Elizabeth, Rain, Stephen, Franklin, Keelsley, and Renee. Loved them all. But he wasn't always there. His life was a tornado, and fatherhood got caught in the wind. Women came and went, leaving scars and some leaving love. But Richard never stopped chasing that spark, even when it burned out. Such is his dark side. With drugs, fire, and redemption, Richard's life wasn't just laughs. It was a war with himself. Cocaine was his shadow in the 70s, turning him paranoid and reckless. He'd be up for days, writing jokes, partying, losing himself. In the 80s, he hit rock bottom. Freebasing in his LA home, he set himself on fire. Ran down the street blazing a human torch. Doctors said he shouldn't have survived, but Richard was too stubborn to die. He turned that pain into comedy, talking about it in my favorite special of his, Live on Sunset Strip in 1982, making folks laugh through the horror. In fact, it took him 2 attempts just to do that show because the doctors hadn't even released him yet, said he was not ready to do stand-up, considering he had just gone through tons of treatment for burning over 60% of his body. First night was an absolute disaster, leading him to give everybody a full refund after about 30 minutes of him not being able to finish a joke. Told everybody you could come back for the second night where he would give it another shot, and that is what we have on the films today, was his second attempt after the doctors still hadn't cleared him. That fire wasn't his only controversy though. He caught hit for using the N-word, especially after he swore it off in 1979. Post-Africa trip, saying it felt wrong. Some fans felt betrayed when he backslid, others didn't care. He pissed off the gay community with jokes at the Hollywood Bowl in 1977, then apologized. But Richard never stayed in one place long enough to please everybody. His run-ins with the law, assault charges, drug busts kept his name in the headlines, but he wore it like a badge. Richard wasn't just a troubled comic, he was also a troubled movie star. On Silver Streak in 1976 with Gene Wilder was his breakout role. Stir Crazy in 1980 made him a household name. He wrote Blazing Saddles in 1974. Brought truth to JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling in 1986, a film that was basically his life story. But Hollywood wasn't kind. Studios tried to tame him, and he fought back. He turned roles down that felt fake, walked away from millions to keep it real. His impact? Man, Richard changed comedy. Before him, stand-up was safe, mostly white. He brought up the streets, the pain, the truth. Comics like Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, they all stand on his shoulders. He showed you could be funny and deep, make folks laugh while you're thinking. He gave black stories a voice when nobody else did. But in 1986, Richard got hit with multiple sclerosis. Slowed him down, stole his fire, but not his spirit. He kept performing even while in a wheelchair, cracking jokes through all the pain. By the late 90s, he was frail, but his eyes still had mischief. Unfortunately, he ended up dying in December 10th of 2005. A heart attack taking him out at 65. Left behind a legacy that is still burning. Movies, albums, and a way of telling truth that nobody topped. Richard Pryor was a comet. Bright, wild, leaving a trail of fire and chaos. He loved, he heard, he laughed, he cried. And he showed the world who could do it all and still come out swinging. That is just a light deep dive into one of my favorite comics of all time. In fact, my favorite comic of all time. Without him, we wouldn't have greats like Eddie Murphy, like I said, and I still will go back and listen to endless Richard Pryor stand-up albums. But let me know what you think. What's your favorite stand-up album? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, stop gooning in the closet.
I'd like to move now, Paul, if you don't mind. to move to the other end to a white person who I give less than a shit about. Who is a very brilliant man. I haven't seen anyone this funny since Jonathan Drake. Jonathan Drake, as you know, used to eat baseballs in the afternoon and fart footballs. And it's close. He's close to that. He's really funny. As you notice, he's trying out for Wolfman next week. He has all that hair on his hands, and it's obvious he jacks off funny because it's on the outside of his hands. He's another brilliant queen that we have on the show. His closet is the Hollywood Bowl.